We are told that those graduating now will have 10 to 12 jobs and 3 to 4 careers, and you're firmly on that trajectory. You began your career of public service as a federal law enforcement officer working narcotics and money laundering.
That's right.
With the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. Why did you begin there? And was there anything that surprised you about the role, or was a big learning?
So the way that kind of transpired was I was in Germany getting my MBA when 9/11 happened. And my whole goal had been, I'm going to get my MBA in Germany, I'm going to live in Germany for a number of years, perfect my German, move home, join the CIA, after I've had this kind of international business experience and my German is better. But after 9/11, I started thinking, if this is what I want to be doing in 5 years, why wouldn't I do it now? And so I finished my program. I graduated with my degree. It was a dual degree program between this German university and Purdue's Krannert School. And so after I finished my MBA, I immediately moved to DC and started applying with federal agencies, top among them and on my list being CIA. So I applied with CIA in September, and then I got a job offer from them in December. And it was a conditional offer contingent upon a background check, medical, psych evals, all those sorts of things. And so I continued with some of my other federal employment opportunities, but this is where I wanted to be. And so as I moved along in the process, I actually withdrew from the FBI's process, from the State Department's process. And now as an adult, I'm horrified that, I was kind of putting all of my eggs in one basket. And my very wise father said, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. And so I did continue with the process with the Postal Inspection Service because my father was a career postal inspector. He worked fraud cases for the entirety of his career and loved his job. And so I kept my application with them. And at that point in time, they, I was going through this process. You might have heard I was a substitute teacher for a while as well. And so then the Postal Inspection Service, they cleared me and brought me on. And in the end, it was an incredible experience because I always knew I wanted to go to CIA, but in the end, my background check process with CIA took close to 4 years. So I ended up spending 2.5 years working narcotics and money laundering cases, which was an incredibly interesting experience. I worked in the DC area. I was on the high intensity drug trafficking area task force. So I worked a lot with Metropolitan PD and DC. I worked a lot with Baltimore Police Department because my territory was Baltimore to DC and some Northern Virginia. So I worked with Maryland State Police a ton on joint cases. And it was an incredible experience, particularly as a young professional, to have the opportunity to be in all of these circumstances, all of these situations where there's so many levels of responsibility. I'm an armed law enforcement officer walking in to do a drug arrest, or quite literally knocking down the doors. Well, I was usually fourth in the lineup, knocking down the doors. And running in, securing the place, being responsible for all of those, kind of everything that happens in an arrest in these federal investigations. And it was just a tremendous learning experience, a tremendous, really formative experience, particularly for a young professional. Additionally speaking, I'm a Spanish speaker, so when we did have drug arrests where it was known that the individuals didn't speak any English or might have limited English, I was always there. I was also one of the only women on my team. Well, I was the only woman on my team. And so when there were women in the house, as there frequently were in some of our drug arrests, it was always, I then became responsible for the women in the home. And so just that, the amount of engagement that you have in sometimes people's darkest points, it was really an incredibly informative position for me to be in, particularly having grown up in the suburbs and having very little access to really challenging circumstances and people who find themselves in bad positions by virtue of who else lives in their home, and then of course those who are making really terrible decisions.
Wow, right. So then your next career, your second career, the CIA, it worked out that you had all your eggs in one basket, right? Yeah. So were there any stories about your background checks or your training or your assignments that were really interesting that you can tell us?
So Going through the process, I did work undercover for my time with the agency, and I did go through the process of getting my employment declassified. And I went through that process because in 2014, we moved back to Virginia, and this, I guess you'll probably get to this in your list. And I initially wasn't planning on getting my employment declassified. I thought, I'll just continue telling people what I've always told people. It's even of less consequence after I'm kind of back in my hometown. But I got my resume cleared from my cover job, and it was basically, she showed up to work. Which in fairness, when you do that job like 10% of the time, that's about as good as it gets. And so I actually went through the process of getting my employment declassified because of the fact that I wanted to be able to have a good resume that actually spoke to some of my skill set. And in the end, it worked out because Stan mentioned I had a good job. I got a great job. I work with Royal & Company, and actually Bill and Pam Royal are in the audience as well. So. But part of it was getting that employment declassified. So when people ask me about what it is I'm allowed to talk about, I'm actually really well versed in kind of the parameters of what I'm allowed to talk about because I had to go through this whole process. I had to get my website cleared by the agency before I could put up my campaign website.